The man who inspired the character Gordon Gekko, Asher Edelman, recently had an interview with CNBC, and he talked about who he believed would be the best candidate for our economy. Now, this is an interesting endorsement considering the fact that this was a Wall Street bigwig, someone who's associated with greed. Take a look at the video.
Let's move on to the presidential elections. I'm curious, we're asking everybody essentially who you think the best candidate for the economy would be.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies?
Well, I think it's quite simple again. If you look at something called velocity of money, you guys know what that is, I presume. That means how much gets spent and turns around. When you have the top 1% getting money, they spend 5–10% of what they earn. When you have the lower end of the economy getting money, they spend 100 or 110% of what they earn. As you've had a transfer of wealth to the top and a transfer of income to the top, you have a shrinking consumer base, basically, and you have a shrinking velocity of money. Bernie is the only person out there who I think is talking at all about both fiscal stimulation and banking rules that will get the banks to begin to generate lending again as opposed to speculation.
Okay.
So from an economic point of view, it's straightforward.
And that's the last time they had him on CNBC.
The one guy literally jumped. I mean,
Hey, can we play
jumped.
the guy in the white shirt? It's like he got punched in the face.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore's talked about this in the past, but once you see the video, it is startling. Let's watch the
beginning of the thing. Watch the guy in the white shirt.
Let's move on to the presidential elections. I'm curious, we're asking everybody essentially who you think the best candidate for the economy would be.
Bernie Sanders.
Without a doubt. Why is that?
No question.
Policies?
Well, I think it's quite...
That's what happens. It's a shock to the system on CNBC, which is the most pro-corporate. It's even more pro-corporate than Fox News is.
And his explanation is so cogent. It's so straightforward. It's so simple.
Yeah.
I like when he goes, obviously you understand what velocity of money is, and I'm like, no,
Nope.
I do not.
Yep.
Yeah. Right? And neither do any of them. That was a great moment, you know?
So, so let me break it down just in case, right? So when people who are middle class get money, or the poor get money in a tax break or whatever it might be, right? Or in a job, they are far more likely to spend a higher percentage of that money back into the economy. Why? Because they need food, they need to pay rent, right? And so if you're making, make up a number, $34,000 a year, you spend almost that entire $34,000 just to be able to survive, right?
Yeah, you're not putting that in the 401k.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas if the money goes to, let's say a guy making $3.5 million a year, that's a lot of money, right? So he's going to have trouble spending that $3.5 million. He might try, from time to time, he might get a yacht, et cetera, but no, as Gordon Gekko here points out, he only spends about 5 to 10% of the extra money he gets from a tax cut or whatever it might be. So taxing him more and then giving that in terms of education or healthcare, et cetera, for the middle class is going to create a velocity of money where then more people are buying stuff and it helps the economy. So in this case, I like calling him Gekko. Gekko is not talking about it in terms of like, oh, wouldn't it be great to help people? Wouldn't it be more moral?
Right.
He's like, no, we'd all make more money because the economy would be strong.
You remember, he's the guy who said greed is good. And it is ironic that Gekko, with this greed is good, it's greed that has led us to this situation where very few control all the dough and have led to the situation where, in a sense, the economy is eating itself. In other words, it's not flourishing for the reasons that he says, because of this velocity of money concept. But you often hear this talked about the minimum wage, the same, that people are so down on minimum wage, but by raising the minimum wage, the idea is, hey, that money is not just going away, that money is going back into the economy. These people
All of it,
buy things.
every second, every dollar of it, every cent of it is going back into the economy.
Yeah.
So it's such a great point by Mark about the irony that greed turned out not to be good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it became voracious and causes to cannibalize the economy. And therefore, even for the people at the top, in the long run, it's not going to be a good thing because there's no one buying the goods that we need to stimulate the economy. He made one more point about the banking rules. Now it's funny because we're talking about the Daily News hatchet job on Bernie Sanders and how people claim, oh, he doesn't know how to break up the big banks or doesn't know what he's doing in regards to the banks. That's all been disproven. Ryan Grimm, great post in the Huffington Post about it. New York Times, very good write-up explaining, no, he actually said the exact right thing on how you would break up the big banks. And by the way, Hillary Clinton has the same plan for how you would break. She's not gonna break up the big banks, but she says if I needed to, she has the same plan as Bernie Sanders, right? So, but in this case, he's saying actually Bernie's banking rules would get the banks to start lending again as opposed to speculation.
Right, that was the thing he added at the end is almost more important than anything else.
Right. Yeah. So let me explain that super quick. So, so the speculation happens when, for example, we take away this very important law that Bill Clinton took away at the very end of his term, Glass-Steagall. So you hear that a lot. What does it mean? Glass-Steagall said you can't take depositors' money you put into the bank, right, and then take it and use that money for your investments at that same bank. Let's say you put the money in Bank of America. Bank of America can't turn around and then bet your money, right? They can't gamble with your money. And because of Glass-Steagall, those two parts of the bank used to be separated. So the investment bank, you want to make any investments? It's capitalism. Go ahead, man, right? Have at it, Hoss. And they did for 40, 50 years under Glass-Steagall, and the economy was shockingly stable, right? And then we got rid of Glass-Steagall, and they merged again, and they said, oh, great, let me take Bob's money and gamble with it. Oh, now it's not my loss. In the end, probably the government will bail it out because it's not going to let Bob go bankrupt, right? They might let us go bankrupt if it was just our money, right? But now we got everybody, by the neck, pretty much.
Yeah.
So we'll take even bigger risk. Now that leads to speculation. And the other thing that it leads to is, well, I'm going to make a lot more money gambling on a derivative than I am lending it out to your small business. Your small business is going to give me a, 5%, 7%, 8%. If I nail a derivative, I'm going to get 20%, 100% return, right? Now, the derivative is a lot more risky, but it's not my risk. I just transfer that risk onto you, right? So I only keep the upside, and you keep all the downside. So on top of all the other problems associated with that, it doesn't stimulate the economy because it doesn't actually incentivize them to lend it to small business or mid-sized businesses or sometimes even big businesses. So in this case, the real Gekko, Asher Edelman here, 100% right. If you actually cared about stimulating the economy, you would do this. And by the way, it's not speculation. We already know we did this for about 40 years. We did it through the New Deal, the Great Society, and in that time, we became the #1 economic power in the world, right? When we took those rules and safeguards away, what happened? Economic crash.